Today I want to take a look at how to automatically convert pages to multiple languages. So here we're looking at a modern communication portal in SharePoint Online, and our goal is to support multiple languages, but have the text translate automatically. So by default, it's coming through in the current user's language, which for my login is English, and we've created a portal and have a couple different things going on. We're going to do add news, choose blank, and we're going to create a test page. I'm going to copy some text from a Microsoft article as sort of filler to give us some content to work with. It's pretty cool. We've got bold headings, we've got hyperlinks, we've got indentation, numbered list, all kinds of things going on. And we're going to call this page Contoso. So that gives us a little bit of test content, something to work with, and our page is called contoso.aspx. Now, to get the automation and the full experience, we first need to turn on multi-language in the portal. Then we go to Azure to create a translation API. Then we make a runbook with PowerShell. And finally, we execute the runbook with MS Flow. So there's a couple different pieces. We have our content now. We want to turn on the languages in the portal. We want to make a translation API. We want to make a runbook, and then have a flow that will automatically execute the runbook. Those are our pieces. Our key technical design components include the modern page source text that we're looking at. We also have the site settings to enable multi-language. And then over in Azure, we're going to have a couple of components. We're going to have a translation API. We're going to have a Azure Function. So the translation API, and that's kind of an endpoint with HTTP where we can send text back and forth. The Azure function is PowerShell code, and this is basically how to modify an ASPX, and it's going to interface with the API. And then finally, we have an MS Flow to automatically run. So this is kind of interesting because you think about the sequence of events, the page changes go to Flow, who then says, hand it over to the Azure function, who then goes to the translation API, and then we walk the entire thing backwards to the updated pages. So that's the design we're looking at. Let's get into the components. From the Azure Portal Create screen, we want to type in the word translate. We get a couple of matches, search resources. I kind of like searching in the top bar up here because you get the icons. And for me, that's a little bit more helpful. And this funny blue icon with the letter A, that's the translation endpoint. And so from this screen, we want to create a new translation. We have a resource group ready to go. We have a region as being, we'll pick out Central US. We'll go ahead and give this a name for the API endpoint. And pricing tier, we'll do standard pay-as-you-go. Haven't looked into that much, but I don't think it'll cost very much to complete. So now with our key settings on the translation endpoint, resource group, name that we're creating it, pay-as-you-go, we hit create. Those are really the only decisions with provisioning for the translation API. We'll hit create, and it takes a few minutes. It'll come back and tell us when complete. Next, we want to search for function app. Go ahead and create one of these, and this is going to be where we host our PowerShell code. So similar process, we're going to pick out our resource group using the same one we already have. We're going to put in a function app name, and we can actually use the exact same name because it's going to end up with a different suffix for Azure Functions domain hosting. So here we have a little bit of simplicity where you can use the same name for the translation API and the Azure function. They live in different domains. And then on runtime stack, this is an important one. We want to go ahead and pick out PowerShell core because otherwise we're not going to be able to run PowerShell code. For version, latest is fine. Region defaults to Central US, and we'll go ahead and create. When you create the Azure Function app, it will make this in the background a storage account with a random number. Just in case you see it in the resource group, don't be surprised. It's just part of the background that's needed for the hosting of the Azure function. Now that we have our Azure resources provisioned, we're going to go grab a couple of key numbers. The first thing is the translation text key. So over here, we have manage keys on the right. We can do show keys, and this is part of our translation resource, which has the funny little blue icon with the letter A. We want to grab a key number and the URL endpoint. So I'll just grab the first key number. Don't really know why I need to have a second one. Location region is Central US, all lowercase. This is interesting. We're going to need this a little bit later, but that's kind of the, how would you say, it's the internal name or the technical name of the region. It might say Central Space US on a lot of the displays, but what we want is this internal technical name for the region. And let's see, go ahead and copy this endpoint for text translation because that's what we're doing. We're not doing documents for this one. We'll focus on text. We want to collect that endpoint. I put all of these things into Notepad++. So we're just collecting our values. Now that we have that part, we want to get into the Azure function. And we need to give it some programming code and fill it in. On the functions, we currently have nothing defined. We're going to add to it. So clicking the create here on the Azure function, this will let us make something with a develop in portal with an HTTP trigger. That's perfect. We're going to put PowerShell code right here in the browser. HTTP trigger 1. Now authorization level is kind of interesting. We're going to keep it on the default function, which basically means that there is an HTTP parameter for how to invoke this. We don't really want anonymous, which would kind of open it for the whole world. Get a little bit of security just so we're the only ones using our resources. On the next screen that comes up, we want to focus on code test and keys. We'll come in here to keys first, and we'll take a look at hidden, show default, okay, copy. Cool. I'm going to collect this into our notepad again, and I'll need that for invoking it from the MS Flow automatically. That's preparation for the auto invoke. Here's the default template. We're going to send it a parameter, which is simply the word Azure. Kick the tires, make sure it runs. It did run successfully because we see the message hello Azure with an HTTP 200, which is awesome. And this is our default from Microsoft of what a function can look like. We're going to update that with some different code. So now I've updated the PowerShell code so that we have the full functions that will do translation. And there's a lot happening here. Quick code review, 90 lines. We're sort of templating in our dependency here of PNP PowerShell. We need that as an external module that we're going to be importing as a dependency. Here we've got a little bit of our sample. We'll be applying that over here for testing. And then we come in and basically make a connection to SharePoint, grab the text, and send it to the API. That's what we're doing. We connect to SharePoint, get the text out, and then send it over to our API. So for that one, we want to grab our key number. This is for our translation API. If you guys remember, this was part of what we copied out earlier. And then what this piece is doing is cleaning the text for any kind of just odd characters, really. We want to clean it down to ASCII text, some known character set that moves through the pipeline well. And then down here, we loop the pieces of the page. So this is getting the client-side page. This is getting the different text controls. And then this is setting it. So here essentially is input. What are the modern SPO text items we have? And then next is the output, where we're actually updating the exact same ASPX page. So we're reading it, translating it, and then writing it all together, and that's what we need to make things work. There is one missing piece in what I'm showing you guys live, the client ID and secret. For that, we need to register an app on the site. No big deal, only takes a minute. We'll go ahead and take care of that now, and we'll put this in so that we have it ready to go for our app. So we'll click Create in the corner. That makes our app registration. Good deal. Over here, we need to grant it permissions. So we'll do the lookup, and we'll give it full control to that one site collection. Not the tenant, just the one site collection. There's a really good blog post out here that covers some of that. We'll find site collection, full control. It's a good reference for the XML. We'll say create and trust it. So as we're moving along, we're collecting more into our notepad. And back over here in our PowerShell code, we need to take the identifier, add that in, take the secret, also add that in. And now our PowerShell code is more complete, where it can connect to the SharePoint Online site. It knows about a sample, and it also has the key for translation. Puts us in a pretty good spot. Now on the site settings menu of our site, I'm going to search for the word language and come in here to language settings. Enable translation, we'll turn it to on. I'm going to put down Spanish. We'll put in Dutch. Very cool, very cool. And I'll even save in French. So I'll have 3 different languages here. Spanish, Dutch, French, saved. Cool. That allows the site to support it. It kind of sets up the plumbing and the background, but it doesn't move the text over automatically, which is why we're going through all the things we are. Here's our sample page. We have a JSON payload. The way to know any of this is working is to set up a test run, which you can do here with your Azure Function. Ultimately, we want to call this automatically when a page is created or modified. We invoke automatically. The first thing, though, is to run it manually, and that's where the trigger screen comes in. And really, the key elements here are the test button at the top, JSON on the right, run at the bottom. Test, JSON, run. We're getting an error. I can't find PNP PowerShell. Kind of knew that was going to happen. There's some more setup work that we need. But once we give it that dependency, things should look a lot. Okay, going into the Azure Functions main screen, we want to scroll down to the left and find Advanced Development Tools. There's something in here about Dependency Management. And we're going to hit Go To, start a new tab. At the top, we're going to click on Debug Console and then PowerShell. That's going to give us a console where we can make more changes. And we want to see what's going on inside the site here. We've got a www root, we've got a host.json file, a couple things going on. We want to confirm that host.json has managed dependency true. I think it does by default. That's all right. We're going to double check it anyway. There's our HTTP trigger with our run function. Should look familiar. That's what we were just editing. So next, we want to add a requirements file for the dependencies. And Nicola has a great blog post where he goes into the how for dependency management under advanced tools. We get into the console. We want to put a file called requirements PSD1, and we want to make that into the www root folder. So manage dependency true, we confirm that part, that's right. You can also kind of load the modules directly without using their managed names. I like using the managed names, and we're going to do an update for that. So here on the console, we have requirements PSD1. It's currently empty. We're going to open that up for editing. Our particular function is looking for PNP PowerShell. That's what we're wanting to use. So we're going to add that with single quote. And then we're going to add equals star with another single quote. We'll go ahead and save it like that. And that's telling the Azure function, we have a dependency, we need this module for things to run correctly, and we'll come back over and run again. Now, one correction on the version number, it actually should say 1.star instead of a generic star. And if you're not sure which version you're working with, you can always run a git command locally on your local PC. And here we can see that pnp.powershell is currently on 1.7. By putting in 1.star, we're letting the dependency manager know which one to download. So instead of star, it's actually one dot star. Want to make sure we had that part. So the function ran, it came back with 204, no content, and we have an error visible that the page does not exist. That's actually really good news, because what that means is that if I come over to the original page itself, we never made translations. We only have one page. If we hit the translation button on the toolbar, we can go ahead and create multiple ASPX pages for each variation of language. So here, if you create for all, you'll have not one page, but four. You'll get the English, but you also have Spanish, Dutch, and French. Clicking View to take a look at each one of these, what you'll notice is the URL has a two-letter abbreviation. So for Spanish, we have ES. For Dutch, we're actually looking at NL. And for French, we're going to be looking at FR. So each language has its own two-letter abbreviation. With that in place, we clear, we run again, see what the Azure function does now. Here we see a warning that PNP PowerShell version numbers. We see a warning on set page context, that they're going to change things in a future release to a different command name. And all the blue are things running with information level. What's interesting is all this blue text. Output, cuando. This is the Spanish output. This is the finished result after the translation runs. Here it says translating content. Here you can see it finding page text. Those are the sources. Here you can see it finding the Contoso ES file. That when you're doing translations, you don't have one web page anymore. You have your primary and you have 3 copies. So we're actually dealing with 4 ASPX files. If I reload the ES page, I can see the body has been fully translated and is matching the text that we had over here in our output of the Azure function. So the Azure function is successfully translating this page, which is fantastic. In fact, if we wanted to even test that, I could come in here and remove all of the different data. Say, okay, we're doing a page edit. We'll go ahead and save that. And yep, we're done. We saved the page, kind of deleted what was there. And actually, that was the Dutch one. So let's do this one more time on Spanish. I just really want to show you guys that the text is coming from the primary page into these secondary translations. So right now I'm looking at ES Contoso with ES for Spanish. And it is the translated version of the original Contoso. But if I come over and I run the function, what happens is it picks up the original text to transfer over. So as this function is running, the page title is the source, but the language is the destination. So it's going to pick up the English text, it's going to invoke the Translation API, watching the execution live on the debug window. We can see all of that happening. And we come back over and check our page. And here you see it changed the word remove to eliminar. So I edited the page manually and it translated that over. The reason this might be helpful is maybe the different language variations need more content or less content, and they're not an exact match, right? So eliminar was the text, page text is what it brought in for the source, and you may actually end up after your translation making changes to the content itself to accommodate a different language. Now, if I want to go back and put things together, that's fine. We can totally do that. Easy enough. Come into page details. We'll go ahead and delete this page that we have for Spanish entirely. It's gone. It's removed. Come into the original page and you'll see a create button. If you delete the ASPX, that is how you can get a fresh start with a brand new create. And that'll go ahead and make a new page, never been seen before. And then we'll come over, we'll check things out, and we're going to have the ability to see our ES page as a replica of the English one. So right now, all it did was copy the page. It made a replica. What our code is doing is translating the text. So now that we have the replica, we can run the translation again. We'll see it come through. You can see the function completing. You can see all the Spanish text on the output. Coming back over to the page itself, we reload, and now you see everything fully translated. So if you need to, you definitely can edit this page as a way of changing the content. If there's some differences, some delta, maybe add, remove, make it slightly different than the original. You may want images that are more meaningful to that language. So keep in mind that you can do that. This is just something we want to automatically translate for getting us started. The final step is MS Flow so that this Azure function will execute when the ASPX is created. Right now, we're running it by hand, and that's fine for debug, that's fine for testing. But we want this run button to be called by MS Flow automatically when the page is created. Let's check that out. That'll be our final step. So here in MS Flow, we're going to give it a name for translation. We're going to look for a trigger. We'll search the word created. There's actually a lot here. When a file is created, properties only is the one that we're looking for. And I know that it sounds a little funny, but the properties only is important for some of the parameters we're putting together, so we'll make sure to include it. So we'll go ahead and feed it the site pages library for our step to invoke. And then we're going to be looking for some JSON compose operations. So the first thing we're going to do is a replace. And we have a formula here that does the replacing of the path to get the language part separated. We're looking for the two-letter ESFR, the language piece in the middle. So we're going to do another compose. And with this one, we're going to bring in a template. So here we're creating the JSON payload that will go to the Azure function. So this is the JSON body that's going to go out to the Azure function, and it's using part of that first compose. The final step is an HTTP post. So we're going to use the HTTP step. We'll change the method to post, and we want this to match up with our Azure function signature. So back over here on the Azure function test, we're going to copy the URL using this get URL at the top, and we're going to bring that into the post. So that includes the key. There's a special key for security. Remember the function level for authentication? That's where this shows up. It's the code equals, and that's what we're using for security. So with that part in place, we'll come here to body, and we'll go ahead and find outputs, and we'll save. Now from our Manage Flow page, we can go over to Translations, check out our menu, and I created 3 new files by invoking Spanish, Dutch, and French to go ahead and create 3 brand new pages. And then we'll see if we can get the flow to automatically do the conversions. Here it is, waking up with 3 running. Okay, and after refreshing flow, we see succeeded status 3 times, duration about half a minute, and come over to the original page. We can open up our translation button at the top. Once again, we see our 3 pages that were cloned. These are the replicas, and what happens is the replica has the original text. MS Flow sees a page being created, and what it does is pick up the text, run it through our Azure function for translation. So here we see French with FR, and that is fully translated, ready to go. We see over here Dutch, and that is on the /NL folder, translated, ready to go. And we also have our Spanish page. Let's type that one in for ES. There we go. And we see our Spanish page at /ES, translated and ready to go. So this has been a full demo of how to configure the system end to end, starting with a brand new modern communication portal, making the Azure Translation API, the Azure Function with PowerShell, and the MS Flow to automatically invoke the translation. Thank you for watching.